Hey folks, so we'll get cracking with the painting of this gateway now, and as I always do, I've done a little colour swatch as a guide for how I'm going to what mood I'm going to try and create with the painting. So that's a nice little doodle there that I'm going to work from, and hopefully get that sort of feeling at the end of it. The first stage with something like this would be to put on the colour wash to cover the painting really, and that's going to need you to use a big brush really. So something like this, or your squirrel brush, something big enough to cover this size of area, because we're going to cover it all, and you don't want to be using a small brush and making loads and loads of little marks with your brush. And the first bit, so we want a nice graded wash. So if I damp, so with clean water, I'm just dipping into the water and just letting that flood down, just to help the colour float on the paper really. So working top to bottom. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you miss a bit, it's fine, I'm sure. You'll catch it up with your paint. So I've got the board on a slight tilt, so it's at, I don't know, about 30 degrees, something like that. Just so that the paint can run down as you apply it. I suppose as well, I don't know, you could probably use one of these brushes. That would be really useful for covering big areas. I'm not going to use that because I don't think everyone's got one, and I just want to make it accessible for you to do. So something like this, or something similar to this, is what I'm going to use. So starting at the top, I've made up a puddle of Payne's Grey with a bit of cobalt in it, cobalt blue, and if I just whack that on, just whack that on like that, and then I'm going to grab the cobalt blue itself, so working underneath, just letting that float down. You've got loads of time to work when you're doing this, because your paper's wet, so it just gives you the, just going a bit darker there, so that needs to be more concentrated at least than the paint that's already on, just to give you, or to prevent a cauliflower. Tilting the board like that, can you say that's running down? That's useful. So I'm going to change the brush now, and I'm going to add a warm colour to that. So we've got burnt sienna, just going to whack that on. And some raw sienna there. So again, you got the stripes at the beginning, but as you work, the water will allow it to blend together. So that's raw sienna there, real golden glow to this painting there. And then I'm going to start moving back towards the blue. Just take that out with a dry brush. And I think as well at the bottom I'm going to put a little bit of crimson, just to really make it interesting. multicoloured. So we've got a little runnel there going down, so I can just change the angle of the board and just allow the paint to mix together in this wash. Even, you know, can you see? I don't know if you can see there, it's just the colours are mixing together. That's a lovely wash, that. And then what I could do to allow that to dry, if I don't want any sort of more movement, I would lay it flat and allow it to dry, so the colours are not sort of guided with gravity then. So I'm going to let that dry, and then we'll carry on with the rest of the painting. So the next bit, we'd start looking at the things that are furthest away in the painting. So the distant hills or mountains in the background there. So I'd start looking at that, and I've made a big puddle with the cobalt blue and a bit of Payne's grey and a touch of crimson in it. Just sort of very economical strokes. Just try and get these hills on in the background there. And allowing, so the colour's not so dark that it's still transparent. It still shows the colour underneath. And what I've done there, I've just grabbed some crimson there to imagine that warmth is coming across that mountain there. That's really wet. I'm going to paint through the drawing of the gate, just so we're not being too fussy with our painting today. That's it, really economical strokes like that. And there's a lot of water on that now, so I just soak it up with a dry brush. Put some crimson in there. Just take up that excess water there. That's good. And then we've got a bit of land there that's even closer to us. So if I grab some cobalt again and some of the Payne's grey, make it a bit darker. And then I'm just going to let it touch that wash in the background there. And again, some warmth into that, so some crimson. So it's really wet there, and I'm just allowing the brush to create some shapes and imagine that there's a few trees, and I think there's a few buildings around that area there. So just sort of brush strokes that sort of capture that surfaces and a bit of light going on it. Just going to squeeze out a bit more blue, using quite a lot of this today. I know, I think it's about timing really, so that I can try and get this separate from the landscape in the background, but with still a little bit of blurring and softer edges there. That's doing alright, that. and then into this part, so there's a little bit of progression and depth to this part of the landscape. And I'm painting around the structure there. Going to just chase that up in a minute. So with a dry brush, just getting rid of these puddles to prevent too many cauliflowers anyway. I'm not too bothered if we get a few. So I'll just take off some colour like that. And that, when we come to paint that bit, it'll just allow to show that there's light on the surfaces as well. That's good. So a bit darker. Come back to that, because I think what will happen, depending on how strong this is and the reflection, etc., will govern what we need to do. Do we need to do a little bit more to give that depth? That's looking all right so far. So moving on to the gate itself now, I'm going to change brush using something a little bit smaller and a little bit still a round brush, but I can get a point with this. So we're still applying the paint as a wash, but obviously now we're working in a smaller area and we're going to be a little bit more careful, but you still want to think about as if you're applying a translucent wash. So trying to keep fluid movements. Just put a bit more water into that. So I'm just going to do the rooftop bit first, and then I'm going to change colour to more of a burnt sienna mix and see if we can get a little bit of the colours mixing together. So that's just burnt sienna, and I'm just allowing it to touch the colour that I've just put on. Again, gravity's just allowing or sort of pulling the colour down. So I've gone back to the darker colour there because that's a slightly different thing. And again, so we've spent a lot of time doing our drawing really well, and I suppose now you've got to just steel yourself a little bit and just think, right, let's go for it. Let's try and think about brush strokes. And although we are filling it in, try and be a little bit loose with it and allow the brush to just find its way. And if it's not perfectly within your pencil marks, it's not the biggest, it's not a crime. If it gives the feeling of what you're after, that's okay. So they are quite chunky, this structure. Quite, again, I've gone at the bottom. There's quite a big sort of chunky foot to this pillar. So the same thing there. See if you can capture it with a single brush stroke. Put some blue in at the bottom. Just gonna sort of put some more burnt sienna into that. That's good. So just looking back where I've been, we've got a few little collections of water there, so just soak it up with your brush, and it just, a bit of housekeeping, keeps the thing clean. I think as well, if you've captured it, try and leave it alone. Which is just trying to get that foot right, and then I'm going to leave that. That's good. That's a nice effect, that. I think I might need an even smaller brush for these other struts. So they're quite dark at the top. They've got a little capping piece, so I'll just whack that on. Again, whoops, I'll get that later. Just get those on, and then we can bit wobbly. That'll do. It's alright, that. You see what I mean? It's not followed the drawing exactly, but it's captured it. I'm quite okay with that. How that's gone. Bit more careful there, so you can see it in the brush stroke. A bit more tentative. Bit more confident with that one. You need a run up, a good cup of tea, and a good run up when you're doing this. Good. So just going back to those. So these two are close, just so I can make that a little bit darker there. Bit of depth to that. And just keeping your eye on these puddles with a dry brush, and relax. So I'll try and connect it now with the landscape, and I'll just go back to this bit of land there and see if I can just redefine that a little bit. Just some quite random shapes, trying to sort of depict some trees and things there. It just adds a bit of depth to the landscape. And then I'm painting it at low tide, so I think I said on the other video it was like an inland sea, but it's right on the edge of the sea, and the tide's coming in and out at various points through the day. So we can see. So that was like a purpley blue colour, and then I've put some burnt sienna on the bottom there. And then there's an embankment there when the tide's low. So if I make up the blue, the cobalt blue, and the Payne's grey, bit of crimson, So again, it's a different brush stroke. You're trying to get some dry brush effect with this one there. Even darker. So that's more crimson there. Just adding a little bit of extra depth to that landscape there. So now we're looking at the reflection of the legs. So that's mainly Payne's Grey actually there that I'm using. So this is like an embankment. It's like be wet sand, won't it? Just enough. I don't want to do too much there. I think we could do with a bit of warmth in that actually. Just grab that because that's going to turn into a cauliflower. Just grab over there. I've got another palette going over here. I've just got a bit of raw sienna. A bit of burnt sienna as well. Just being careful not to touch those reflections there. I'm going to come back to those. Just going to, so the water behind, I'm just going to just give that some warmth as well. So just picking that out a little bit just to give it some contrast. So I've got the burnt sienna with a bit of the Payne's Grey in it, I think that. So there was a cauliflower coming there, so I wasn't the best decision I made there, but just put more concentrated paint in and hopefully that'll repair it. So just a few finishing touches now really, I think, with a smaller brush, so this very thin one. So just little strokes, very easy strokes like that. Not too much. So that's a dry brush stroke. And then with a bit paler, just a bit of texture at the front there, so just flicking the paint. Probably could use a bigger brush there. I'm struggling with the small one really, so the bigger marks. It's gone quite dark, this corner. I'm not 100% happy with that. But I think we'll go with that. I think, yeah, that's all right. It's a good exercise. So hopefully you can have fun with that, and let me know how you get on.